Welcome to DeepRest, your place to relax and unwind. Subscribe now and join us for peaceful moments.
Before thunder had a voice, and before the sky understood that it could rule, the universe existed in a state of deep and ancient quiet, a silence so vast and patient that time itself seemed to drift rather than move, expanding gently like a slow breath drawn by creation. And within this primordial calm, the first great beings emerged, the Titans, born not from intention but from raw existence itself, embodiments of earth, sky, sea, memory, and time, colossal and enduring, moving with the certainty of mountains and the inevitability of tides, their power immense, yet strangely burdened, for even beings of near eternity felt the subtle tension of what was yet to come. And among them ruled Cronus, Titan of time, whose dominion granted him a rare awareness, the knowledge that all things, no matter how powerful, are carried forward by moments they cannot stop. And this awareness planted a fear within him, nourished by an ancient prophecy whispered through the fabric of reality itself, foretelling that one of his own children would one day rise and take his throne. And Cronus, unable to accept the natural rhythm of succession, mistook change for destruction and control for safety, allowing fear to shape his actions until love became suspicion and guardianship became cruelty. And so when his children were born, radiant beings filled with untapped potential and future order, he swallowed them one by one, believing that by containing them within himself he could trap destiny, freeze the flow of time, and preserve his reign forever, unaware that destiny does not resist force, but simply waits beyond it, patient and unbroken. And Rhea, his queen, goddess of motherhood and continuity, watched this cycle repeat with quiet sorrow, her heart heavy with grief as each child vanished, until the moment came when she carried her youngest, and in that moment she felt something different, not defiance or chaos, but balance, a gentle steadiness, a presence that felt like calm after long tension. And she understood instinctively that this child was not meant to shatter the cosmos, but to realign it. And so when Zeus was born beneath a sky untouched by thunder, she acted not with haste, but with clarity, wrapping a simple stone in cloth and offering it to Cronus, who swallowed it without suspicion, while she carried her son away beneath starlight and silence, across seas that whispered softly against the hull of her journey, to the island of Crete, a place where the land itself seemed to breathe slowly, where mountains curved protectively around hidden valleys, and caves opened like quiet sanctuaries. And there Zeus was hidden, not in splendor or ceremony, but in warmth and stillness, nourished by the milk of the gentle goat Amalthea,
whose presence grounded him in calm, and protected by the Curetes, who danced not in violence but in rhythm, striking shields in measured harmony whenever the infant cried, weaving sound into concealment, turning care into protection. And as Zeus grew, his childhood unfolded far from fear and prophecy, shaped instead by listening, by long days watching sunlight slide across stone walls, by feeling cool air flow through caverns and warm winds brush his skin, by observing how clouds gathered and dispersed without command, how waves rose and fell without conflict. And in this environment, he learned without being taught that the universe moved according to balance rather than force,
that strength did not require dominance, and that patience itself could shape worlds. And though he did not yet wield lightning nor summon storms, the sky responded subtly to him, light shifting when he felt joy, air growing heavy when he grew thoughtful, as if the heavens recognized something familiar within him. And while Cronus sat upon his throne believing himself secure, time continued its gentle progression, carrying Zeus forward not with urgency, but with inevitability, allowing him to mature in wisdom before power. And as he reached adulthood, Zeus began to understand his origin, not as a burden, but as a responsibility, recognizing that the cycle of fear and control that ruled the Titans could not continue without unraveling existence itself. And when he finally returned to confront his father, he did so not with fury, but with resolve tempered by compassion, offering release rather than annihilation, freeing his swallowed siblings and restoring movement to a universe long held in tension. And the great conflict that followed, remembered as the Titanomachy, unfolded not as endless chaos, but as a vast realignment, a cosmic reshaping where mountains rose and fell, seas shifted, and the sky itself learned its voice. And through it all, Zeus remained centered, understanding that thunder was not anger, but expression, lightning not cruelty, but clarity, manifestations of energy finding balance. And when the old order finally yielded to the new, Zeus did not claim the heavens in triumph, but accepted them in humility, knowing that rulership was not ownership, but stewardship, a duty to maintain harmony between gods and mortals, between sky and earth, between power and peace. And thus the thunder that would one day bear his name was born not from wrath, but from understanding, a sound meant not to terrify, but to remind, a steady echo of order woven into the vast silence of existence. And in this beginning, before legends hardened into stories, and before storms were feared, Zeus learned the most important truth of all, that to rule the sky, one must first learn how to listen, how to wait, and how to let the universe breathe. After the great realignment of the cosmos and the quiet fall of the Titans, the universe did not rush into celebration, for even victory among gods required time to settle. And Zeus, now standing at the threshold of his destiny, did not ascend immediately to loud glory or unquestioned authority, but instead allowed the world to breathe, understanding that order imposed too quickly becomes another form of chaos. And so the early days after the Titanomachy were marked not by thunderous proclamations, but by long stretches of calm, where the sky stretched wide and clear above a reshaped earth, and the seas rolled with a steadier rhythm, as if relieved to be free from ancient tension. Zeus gathered his siblings not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a center around which balance could form, and together they chose Mount Olympus, not because it towered above all lands and dominance, but because it stood between earth and sky, a place of meeting rather than separation. And there the Olympians began to settle into their roles, learning not only their powers, but their responsibilities. For Zeus believed deeply that power without purpose would simply repeat the mistakes of the Titans, and so he listened, allowing Hera to shape the order of bonds and oaths, Poseidon to understand the moods of the sea, Demeter to feel the pulse of the land, and Hestia to hold the quiet center of hearth and home. And in this way Olympus did not rise through force, but through alignment, each god finding their place like a note settling into harmony. Zeus himself learned slowly what it meant to be the sky, not merely the space above all things, but the presence that connects them, the bridge between realms. And as he watched clouds gather and disperse, storms form and fade, he came to understand that even thunder must be measured, that to strike too often would create fear rather than order, and so he practiced restraint, allowing rain to nourish rather than destroy, lightning to illuminate rather than terrorize, and the sky to feel vast and protective rather than oppressive. And this approach shaped how both gods and mortals would come to see him, not as a constant storm, but as a steady presence, felt even when unseen. As time passed, mortals began to emerge more clearly into the world's awareness, fragile yet curious beings whose lives moved quickly compared to the gods, and Zeus observed them with particular care, for in their short lives he saw reflection, adaptation, and creativity, qualities the Titans had never valued, and he chose not to rule them through constant intervention, but through subtle guidance, allowing them to build, to fail, to learn, and to wonder, understanding that growth requires space. And so the sky watched quietly as villages formed, fires were lit, and stories began to take shape beneath the stars, stories that would eventually carry his name, not as a distant tyrant, but as a presence woven into the rhythm of daily life. Yet even in peace, challenges emerged, for the memory of the Titans lingered, and echoes of their power stirred uneasily in forgotten corners of the world, reminding Zeus that balance is not a fixed state, but a continuous practice. And when disturbances arose, he did not always answer with force, but often with adjustment, shifting winds, altering seasons, allowing consequences to teach rather than punish. And this philosophy shaped Olympus itself, where debate, counsel, and reflection became as important as strength. And Zeus found himself not merely commanding, but mediating, listening to the concerns of gods whose domains sometimes overlapped or conflicted, learning that leadership was less about issuing orders and more about holding space for resolution. Hera, who would become his queen, challenged him often, not from rebellion, but from commitment to structure and continuity. And through their union, Zeus learned that authority must be grounded in partnership, that even the sky must recognize the value of bond and promise. And although their relationship would be remembered in complex ways, at its core lay the tension between freedom and order, a tension Zeus continually sought to balance. Meanwhile, Olympus grew not as a fortress, but as a living realm, shaped by light, cloud, and stone, a place where silence held as much power as speech. And Zeus often spent long periods simply watching the world below, following the slow arc of the sun, the gentle procession of seasons, the rise and fall of human generations. And in these observations he developed a deeper understanding of time, different from Cronus's rigid control, seeing it instead as a flowing river that nourished everything it touched. And this understanding softened him, teaching him that permanence lies not in holding still, but in allowing change without losing coherence. There were moments when Zeus tested his voice, letting thunder roll gently across distant mountains, not to frighten, but to announce presence, to remind both gods and mortals that the sky was awake, watching, maintaining order. And over time, these moments became signals rather than threats, markers of transition, of storms passing, of renewal arriving, and thus thunder became a language rather than a weapon, and lightning a tool of clarity rather than destruction. As Olympus stabilized, Zeus began to sense that his role extended beyond maintenance into inspiration, that the sky could not only shelter but also awaken curiosity. And so he allowed myths to form naturally, letting mortals tell stories that reflected their understanding of him, knowing that stories are bridges between the seen and unseen. And through these stories, Zeus became more than a force of nature. He became a symbol of balance, authority tempered by listening, power guided by restraint. And while not all tales would be gentle, their variety reflected the complexity of existence itself, something Zeus accepted rather than resisted. And so the second chapter of his reign unfolded not in conquest but in cultivation, a long, patient shaping of order, where Olympus learned how to exist without repeating the sins of the past, and Zeus learned that being king of the gods meant less about standing above all things, and more about holding the vastness together, quietly, steadily, allowing the universe to move, to breathe, and to find rest beneath an ever-watchful sky. As the ages continued to unfold beneath the vast and watchful sky, Zeus began to feel the true weight of immortality, not as a gift of endless time, but as a responsibility that deepened with every passing era. For unlike mortals whose lives burned briefly yet brightly, the gods endured through cycles of rise and decline, witnessing civilizations bloom and fade like seasons, and Zeus, seated at the quiet center of Olympus, felt each transition not as loss alone, but as part of a larger rhythm he was sworn to protect. And this awareness slowly reshaped his understanding of power, teaching him that eternity does not grant freedom from consequence, but rather multiplies it, as every choice echoes far beyond its moment. He observed how mortals looked to the sky not only for weather, but for meaning, searching the movement of clouds, the sudden strike of lightning, or the calm of a clear night for signs that their struggles were seen. And Zeus realized that to rule wisely, he must be careful not to impose certainty where mystery was necessary, for mystery fuels hope, curiosity, and growth, while absolute answers can freeze the spirit. And so he learned to communicate not through constant intervention, but through subtle alignment, allowing signs to appear without removing the necessity of human choice. Yet even with restraint, conflicts arose, both among gods and within Zeus himself, for immortality sharpens internal tension rather than dulling it, and Zeus often found himself caught between compassion and law, between the desire to protect and the necessity of allowing hardship to shape resilience. And these moments weighed heavily upon him, for every storm he withheld and every storm he released carried consequences that rippled across land and sea. The gods, too, struggled under the new order, as immortality does not erase emotion, and jealousy, pride, love, and ambition stirred within Olympus like shifting winds, sometimes clashing in ways that demanded Zeus's attention, not as a king wielding authority, but as a mediator holding balance. And he learned that even among divine beings, listening often prevented greater destruction than command ever could. And so councils were held beneath open skies, voices rising and falling like tides, while Zeus absorbed each perspective, aware that unity could not be forced, but had to be cultivated patiently. As mortals grew in number and complexity, building cities, crafting laws, and shaping cultures, Zeus became increasingly aware that the line between guidance and domination was dangerously thin, and he chose again and again to step back rather than forward, allowing humans to claim ownership of their destinies, even when their choices led to suffering, because he understood that meaning is forged not in perfect protection, but in struggle tempered by hope. And this decision, though wise, was not painless, for watching hardship without intervening demanded a strength far greater than striking it away with thunder. At times, Zeus would walk the edge of the sky, gazing down at fields torn by drought or cities shaken by conflict, feeling the pull to act directly. And in those moments, he reminded himself of the Titans, of Kronos' fear-driven control, and of how domination, even when intended to preserve order, ultimately suffocates growth. And so Zeus allowed himself to be a guardian rather than a puppeteer, trusting that the spark of consciousness within mortals would guide them forward, even through darkness. Love, too, complicated the weight of immortality, for Zeus found himself drawn to the fleeting intensity of mortal lives, to their urgency, their passion, their unfiltered emotion. And through these connections he glimpsed perspectives unavailable to gods bound by eternity, learning humility through contrast. And though these unions would echo through myth in tangled ways, at their core lay Zeus's longing to understand existence not only from above, but from within, to feel time as mortals did, sharp and precious, even if only briefly. These experiences did not weaken him, as some believed, but deepened his empathy, expanding his understanding of responsibility beyond law into lived experience. And this empathy began to shape the subtle laws of fate itself, as Zeus worked not to erase destiny, but to ensure that within its structure choice still mattered, that paths were not prisons, but frameworks within which courage, wisdom, and transformation could emerge. Meanwhile, the concept of justice evolved under his watch, no longer defined solely by punishment, but by balance, proportion, and restoration. And Zeus became less the god of retribution and more the keeper of equilibrium, ensuring that actions carried consequences without tipping the scales into endless cycles of revenge. And this philosophy slowly influenced both divine and mortal realms, shaping laws, ethics, and the belief that fairness was not rigid sameness, but contextual harmony. Yet even as wisdom grew, so too did the awareness of limitation, for Zeus came to understand that not even the sky is infinite in control, that certain forces, time, entropy, the quiet pull of fate, exist not as enemies, but as boundaries. And rather than resisting these limits, he learned to work within them, aligning his will with the deeper currents of existence, becoming less a commander of reality and more its steward. In moments of solitude, Zeus reflected on his own origins, on the fragile infant hidden from Cronus, on the fear that once ruled the cosmos, and he saw clearly that power born from survival must evolve into power guided by understanding, or else it collapses back into tyranny. And this realization anchored him, reminding him that his role was not to dominate the universe, but to hold space for it to unfold. As centuries passed, Zeus's presence became quieter yet more profound, felt not only in storms, but in moments of stillness, in the pause before rain, in the silence of high mountains, in the clarity that follows chaos. And mortals came to sense the sky not as a threat, but as a witness, a vast awareness beneath which their stories mattered. And though they would never fully understand the complexity of the God who watched over them, they felt his influence in the balance of their world. Thus, the third movement of Zeus's story was not defined by conquest or rebellion, but by introspection, restraint, and the slow refinement of authority into wisdom, as the king of the gods learned that true strength lies not in the force to change everything, but in the discernment to know what must be allowed to change on its own, holding the cosmos together not with thunder alone, but with patience, humility, and the quiet courage to let existence breathe beneath an eternal sky. As the final ages of Zeus's long watch unfolded beneath the ever-turning heavens, he came to understand that eternity is not a destination, but a state of continuous becoming, a river that never stops flowing, yet never leaves its source. And this realization reshaped the way he inhabited the sky, no longer as a throne above all things, but as a vast presence woven into the fabric of existence itself. For Zeus had seen storms rise and fall, civilizations build temples and watch them crumble, names once spoken with reverence fade into whispers, and through it all he remained, not unchanged, but refined by time into something quieter and deeper than the thunderous god of early myth. He watched mortals grow increasingly distant from the gods, not out of defiance, but out of curiosity and confidence, learning to explain the world through observation and reason. And rather than feeling diminished by this shift, Zeus felt a profound calm, and he understood that belief evolving into understanding was not a loss of meaning, but an expansion of it, and that humanity's desire to comprehend the universe mirrored his own ancient longing to understand his place within it. There were nights when Zeus would drift through the high silence above the world, the stars stretching endlessly in all directions, and he would feel the subtle hum of reality itself, a reminder that even gods are participants in something far larger than their individual wills. And in those moments he felt not loneliness, but belonging, as though the cosmos itself acknowledged him not as ruler, but as kin, a consciousness aligned with its rhythm. Memory became both a comfort and a weight, for Zeus remembered the fear that birthed him, the violence that freed him, the chaos that followed his rise, and he saw clearly how power, when unexamined, repeats the mistakes it seeks to correct, and so he took solace in knowing that his own journey had bent toward wisdom rather than collapse, that he had learned to pause where once he would have struck, to listen where once he would have commanded, and this evolution, slow and often painful, felt to him like the true victory over Cronus, a triumph not of force but of understanding. The gods themselves changed under this quiet rule, becoming less defined by spectacle and more by symbolism, less present as figures of intervention and more as archetypes embedded in human thought, emotion, and culture. And Zeus accepted this transformation without resistance, recognizing that myths do not die when they are no longer believed literally, but when they cease to resonate internally. And as long as humans looked to the sky in moments of awe, fear, or wonder, a part of him would always remain alive within them. Time stretched onward, and Zeus began to sense the future not as a single path, but as a field of possibilities, some bright, some uncertain, some dark, and he understood that the destiny of the universe would not hinge on his actions alone, but on the cumulative choices of countless beings, mortal and immortal alike. And this awareness freed him from the burden of omnipotence, allowing him to exist not as a solitary guardian, but as one voice within a cosmic chorus. He contemplated the fate of stars, how even the most radiant suns eventually exhaust themselves and fade into silence. And rather than fearing this inevitability, he found peace in it. For endings, he realized, are not negations but transformations, necessary pauses that give rise to new forms of existence. And if the universe itself was destined to cool, tear apart, or collapse inward someday, then that too was simply another chapter in a story far grander than any god's reign. There were moments when Zeus turned his awareness inward, questioning whether consciousness itself was the universe's way of observing and understanding itself, whether the thoughts of mortals, the reflections of philosophers, and the quiet musings of gods were all expressions of the same underlying curiosity. And this idea filled him with a gentle reverence, suggesting that his role was not merely to oversee the cosmos, but to participate in its self-awareness, to be both watcher and participant in the unfolding mystery. As ages blurred into one another, Zeus's presence became almost imperceptible, not absent but diffused, embedded in natural law rather than dramatic intervention. And lightning no longer served as a symbol of wrath, but as a reminder of energy, of connection between sky and earth, of forces unseen yet fundamental. And in this way Zeus endured not as a tyrant of the heavens, but as a principle of balance, a quiet intelligence woven into the structure of reality. Mortals, unaware of his constant observation, continued to dream, to question, to reach beyond their limits, sending machines into space, mapping galaxies, and pondering their origins. And Zeus watched these efforts with a calm pride, seeing in them an echo of his own ancient rebellion against ignorance and fear. For just as he once challenged the rule of the Titans to bring order and clarity, humanity now challenged the unknown to bring understanding, and this parallel convinced him that the spark of consciousness was the universe's most enduring force. Occasionally, in moments of profound stillness, a human might feel a sudden sense of vastness, a quiet realization of their place within the infinite, and though they might name it wonder or insignificance, Zeus recognized it as connection, a fleeting alignment between individual awareness and cosmic truth. And in those moments he felt closest to the world he watched over, not through worship, but through shared understanding. The legacy of Zeus, he knew, would not be measured in temples or myths alone, but in the enduring idea that power can evolve, that authority can soften into wisdom, and that even the mightiest forces must learn restraint to sustain harmony. And this legacy, intangible yet profound, felt more lasting than any monument of stone. As the universe continued its slow expansion, stretching space itself thinner with every passing eon, Zeus embraced the silence that came with distance, recognizing that meaning does not diminish when voices grow quiet, but often deepens, and that the absence of constant intervention allowed existence to speak for itself. In the end, Zeus did not seek an ending to his story, for he understood that stories like his do not conclude, they disperse, dissolving into influence, memory, and structure, becoming part of the unseen architecture that holds reality together. And so he remained, not waiting for worship, not demanding acknowledgement, but present in the rhythm of storms, the order of the cosmos, and the quiet moments when beings look upward and feel both small and infinite at once, knowing without words that they are part of something vast, ancient, and alive. Thus the story of Zeus closed, not with a final thunderclap, but with a breath held gently across eternity, a silent understanding between sky and consciousness, where power yields to wisdom, eternity yields to meaning, and the universe continues its endless unfolding beneath an ever-watchful, ever-evolving sky. As time itself seemed to thin into something almost transparent, Zeus no longer measured existence in eras or reigns, but in awareness, in the subtle shift of meaning that rippled through the universe like a quiet breath. And from the heights beyond Olympus, beyond even the familiar architecture of the heavens, he perceived reality not as a hierarchy of gods and mortals, but as an immense, interwoven field of consciousness unfolding endlessly in all directions. For the thunder that once defined him had softened into resonance, a deep, steady vibration that aligned with the heartbeat of existence itself. And in this state, Zeus understood that the ultimate form of power is not command, but coherence, the ability to remain aligned with the flow of becoming, without resisting its transformations. He watched galaxies drift farther apart as the universe expanded, stars aging into red giants before collapsing into white dwarfs or vanishing into black holes, and rather than seeing decay, he perceived a vast choreography of renewal, a reminder that nothing is ever truly lost, only rearranged into forms yet to be understood. and this realization filled him with a profound serenity that no throne or victory had ever granted. Memory continued to surface within him, not as nostalgia, but as insight, revealing patterns that spanned from his earliest moments hidden in a cave on Crete to the countless ages he spent observing civilizations rise, question their gods, and eventually turn inward in search of meaning. And Zeus recognized that this inward turn was not a rejection of the divine, but its most refined expression, for consciousness seeking itself is the purest act of reverence. The other gods, long since woven into symbol and story, existed now as subtle currents within human thought, emotions, and archetypes, and Zeus felt no sorrow at their transformation, understanding that myths achieve immortality not by remaining unchanged, but by evolving alongside the minds that carry them. And so Hera lived on in the idea of commitment and consequence, Athena in wisdom and strategy, Apollo in creativity and clarity, while Zeus himself diffused into the very notion of order emerging from chaos. There came a point when Zeus no longer distinguished between watching the universe and being the universe, as the boundary between observer and observed dissolved into a seamless continuum. And in this state, he perceived that awareness itself might be the universe's way of experiencing its own existence, that every conscious being, from mortal minds to immortal intelligences, was a localized expression of a greater unified perception, temporarily focused through individual form. This understanding did not diminish individuality, but contextualized it, allowing Zeus to appreciate the fleeting beauty of finite lives precisely because they were finite, because meaning intensifies when time is limited. And from this perspective, mortality appeared not as a flaw, but as a feature, a catalyst for depth, urgency, and creativity. Curiosity without fear. There were moments when Zeus turned his awareness toward the far future, toward possibilities where stars had burned out and galaxies had drifted beyond visible horizons, leaving isolated islands of matter suspended in darkness. And even there he perceived potential, for silence itself can be fertile, a canvas upon which new forms of existence might someday emerge. And if the universe were to cool into stillness or tear itself apart under accelerating expansion, that too would be a transformation rather than an end. The concept of finality lost its grip on him entirely, replaced by a sense of perpetual unfolding that required no ultimate conclusion, only continuous reinterpretation. Zeus reflected on his own name, once spoken with fear and reverence, now echoing mostly through literature, art, and memory. And he recognized that identity, like all things, is temporary, a useful structure that eventually dissolves into influence rather than form. And this did not frighten him, for influence, unlike form, is not bound by time or location. As his presence grew ever more subtle, Zeus found himself less inclined to intervene and more inclined to listen, attuning himself to the quiet intelligence embedded within natural law, the equations governing energy and matter, the delicate balance that allows complexity to arise from simplicity. And in this listening, he felt a communion deeper than any prayer ever offered in his name. A human mind would brush against this same awareness during moments of deep contemplation or creative insight, feeling suddenly connected to something vast and benevolent without being able to name it. And Zeus recognized these moments as points of resonance, brief alignments where individual consciousness touched the greater whole. And though no words were exchanged, understanding passed effortlessly between them. The notion of legacy returned to him once more, not as a desire to be remembered, but as a curiosity about what truly endures, and he saw that stories, ideas, and values, outlast empires, that compassion survives conquest, that curiosity transcends dogma, and that the deepest legacy of any intelligence lies in its contribution to the ongoing conversation of existence. Zeus realized then that his story, like all great stories, was never meant to conclude neatly, for endings imply separation, and separation was an illusion he no longer entertained, and so his narrative dissolved gently into the larger story of the cosmos, becoming indistinguishable from it, a thread woven so seamlessly into the fabric of reality that it could no longer be isolated. As the ages stretched beyond comprehension, Zeus existed not as a figure seated upon clouds, but as a quiet coherence within the vast complexity of being, present wherever order emerges, wherever chaos finds balance, wherever awareness turns back upon itself in wonder. And thus, the final chapter of Zeus's tale did not close with thunder or silence alone, but with continuity, a soft, infinite persistence that required no witness, no worship, no name, only the endless unfolding of existence itself, where the sky is not above, but within, where power transforms into understanding, and where the story of Zeus becomes inseparable from the story of the universe, ongoing, unresolved, and eternally alive.